At that dinner table, surrounded by the people I loved most, I realized something that would change everything. My nephew pointed at my car and said words that stung like a slap, not because they were cruel, but because they were a mirror. Everyone laughed, and I smiled. But inside, I was making a decision that would strip away every pretense I'd carefully built over the years. That night, my sister texted me about the house payment, and I typed 3 words that would set my family free. Everything will be settled. But they had no idea what I meant. They had no idea what I'd already decided. And they certainly had no idea what it had cost me to get here. Hello, my dear friends. Before I tell you my story, I want you to know that what you're about to hear is filled with truth, betrayal, love, and redemption. Each story we share on this channel touches the soul and reveals what really happens behind closed doors. It's the reality that nobody talks about. It's the sacrifice that goes unnoticed. It's the love that keeps on giving, even when it hurts. Before I begin, let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is. I just want to know I'm not alone in this. And if you feel moved by what you hear, if this story resonates with something in your own heart, please consider subscribing to Grandma True Stories. Your subscription helps us reach more people and reminds them that they're not the only ones carrying these silent burdens. Now, let me tell you what really happened. My name is Margaret Eleanor Chen. Though everyone has always called me Maggie, I'm 72 years old, and I've learned that life doesn't always turn out the way you plan it. But somehow, it turns out exactly the way it needs to. 10 years ago, I lost my husband, Robert. We'd been married for 47 years. He was the kind of man who made everything seem simple, the kind of husband who'd hold your hand in the grocery store and make you feel like the most important person in the world. When he passed, I thought a part of me died with him, but I was wrong. The hard part was learning to live without him. The harder part was learning to live with what came after. After Robert died, I was left with our house, a beautiful 3-bedroom home in a quiet neighborhood that we'd bought 35 years ago. It was paid off, which should have been a blessing. And it was. But it was also a burden I didn't see coming. You see, property taxes don't care that your husband is gone. The roof doesn't wait for you to feel ready before it needs repairs. Medical bills don't disappear just because you're grieving. And life keeps moving forward whether you're ready or not. I worked as a teacher for 38 years. Elementary school, 3rd grade, mostly. I loved those children like they were my own. Teaching wasn't just a job for me, it was a calling. When I retired at 65, I thought I'd done enough. I thought Robert's pension and my modest retirement savings would be enough. I thought I could finally rest. But retirement came with surprises. Medical bills from Robert's final year of illness were larger than I expected. Our insurance had covered most of it, but not all of it. Then there were the property taxes, which seemed to climb higher every year. And then my son, Michael, my only child, he hit a rough patch. He'd lost his job, and his wife was struggling with medical issues of her own. They had 2 children, my grandchildren, and they were drowning. I couldn't let them drown. That's when I made my first quiet decision. I took a part-time job at a local bookstore. 20 hours a week. Just enough to make the difference without making it obvious. I'd tell people I was doing it because I loved books, because I missed working. And that was true. But the real reason was that every paycheck went to Michael. Quietly, without fanfare, without telling anyone. My sister Patricia didn't know. My friends didn't know. Even Michael didn't know the full extent of what I was doing. I was careful about that. Pride is a strange thing. It can live in the person who's giving just as much as in the person who's receiving. I didn't want Michael to feel like he owed me. He was already struggling. The last thing he needed was the weight of his mother's sacrifice on top of everything else. So I kept my secrets. I maintained my appearance. My car, a 2015 Honda Accord, was modest but reliable. I dressed well enough. I had my hair done every 6 weeks. I went to dinner with my sister and her family every other Sunday. I was the independent widow who was doing just fine, thank you very much. I was the successful former teacher who didn't need help from anyone. It was all a beautiful lie. The truth was, I was stretched as thin as tissue paper. Every month was a calculation. Every expense was weighed. Could I afford to have my car serviced? Maybe. Should I get my eyeglasses prescription updated? Probably not this year. Could I go on that cruise my friend Martha was planning? Absolutely not. But I smiled and said I was too busy. I made excuses. I maintained the illusion. And then came that Sunday. The dinner that changed everything. Patricia had invited the whole family to her house for dinner. Her husband George, her 2 adult children, Susan and David, and their families. 18 people around that long dining room table. It was one of those dinners where the food is abundant, the conversation is loud, and everyone's showing off just a little bit. Susan was talking about her new promotion at work. George was bragging about the golf tournament he'd won. Patricia kept mentioning the new kitchen renovation they were having done. And I sat there, smiling, eating the roasted chicken and mashed potatoes, listening to it all. Michael and his family were there too. My daughter-in-law caught my eye at one point and gave me a grateful smile. She knew. Or at least, she suspected. Michael's wife was perceptive like that. She saw things others missed. Then it happened. We were finishing dinner. And someone, I think it was George, had asked how I was managing with the car. My Honda had a small dent on the side from a parking lot mishap, nothing serious, but it was noticeable. Still driving that old thing, he said, laughing. Maggie, you could get yourself something nicer. You must have enough saved up from teaching all those years. And before I could answer, my nephew David, he's 16, full of that teenage blend of innocence and cruelty. He pointed at my car through the dining room window. Mom says you probably borrowed it from your boss, he said. She said no way could you afford to buy a car on what a bookstore pays. The table went quiet for a moment, then someone laughed. Then someone else laughed. It wasn't mean-spirited laughter, exactly. It was the kind of laughter that comes from the uncomfortable truth that had just been spoken out loud. Everyone knew I worked at the bookstore. Everyone thought it was charming, a retired teacher filling her time with something she loved. Nobody knew it was survival. Patricia's face went red. She started to say something, to apologize for what her son had said, but I just smiled. I put down my fork, I took a sip of water, and I smiled. It's a good car, I said quietly. It gets me where I need to go. And then I excused myself. I helped with the dishes. Patricia tried to stop me, but I insisted. I said my goodbyes around 8 o'clock, hugged everyone, and drove home in that borrowed, or maybe owned Honda of mine. When I got home, I sat in my living room in the dark for a long time. I didn't turn on the lights. I just sat there in the quiet of my house, listening to the sounds of the neighborhood settling in for the night. And I thought about all the small moments that had led me here. All the choices I'd made. All the sacrifices I'd made without anyone asking me to make them. Then my phone buzzed. It was a text from Patricia. Don't forget the house payment is due. I stared at that message for a long moment. The house payment, the thing that represented everything, my independence, my burden, my love, my struggle, all wrapped up in one number. I typed back, everything will be settled. And I meant it. In that moment, I made a decision that would change everything. I was done pretending. I was done carrying this alone. It was time to tell the truth, whatever the cost. But first, I needed to understand what that cost would be. Because sometimes, the biggest sacrifices are the ones we make when we finally decide to stop sacrificing in silence. The next morning, I woke up before the sun rose. I didn't sleep much that night. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying the dinner over and over in my mind. David's words, the laughter, Patricia's text, my own reply, everything will be settled. What did I mean by that exactly? I got out of bed at 5:30, made myself a cup of coffee, and sat at my kitchen table with a legal pad and a pen. I'd always been a planner. When you teach 3rd grade for nearly 4 decades, you learn to organize chaos. You learn to see the bigger picture while managing the small details. And now, I needed to apply that same skill to my life. I wrote at the top of the page, THTRE. Then I started listing everything. Not just the financial facts, but the emotional ones too. The money I'd been sending to Michael. The hours I'd been working. The medical bills I'd been quietly paying. The property taxes. The roof repairs. The reality of my situation, not the pretend version I'd been showing everyone, but the actual messy, complicated truth. When I finished, I looked at that list and I cried. I'm not ashamed to say it. I sat at my kitchen table in the soft light of early morning, and I let myself cry for all the years I'd been carrying this alone. For all the times I'd smiled when I was breaking inside. For all the sacrifices I'd made without anyone even knowing they were sacrifices. But then I did something else. I dried my tears, and I made a decision. I called Thomas. Thomas Chen is my cousin. Well, my late husband's cousin, technically, but he's been family to me for decades. He's a financial advisor, one of the smartest men I know, and he's always been like a brother to me. When Robert died, Thomas was there. When I didn't know how to manage the insurance policies and the investments, Thomas helped me. We had coffee every month, and he'd check in on me, make sure I wasn't making any foolish financial decisions. He answered on the third ring. "Maggie, it's not even 6 in the morning. Are you okay?" "I need your help," I said, "and I need you to be honest with me." Completely honest. There was a pause. "I'll be over in an hour." Thomas arrived at my house at 7 o'clock with 2 coffees from my favorite cafe and the kind of concerned look that told me he knew this was serious. We sat at my kitchen table, the same place I'd been an hour before, making my list, and I told him everything. I told him about Michael. About how I'd been sending him money every month without telling anyone. About the bookstore job and the part-time income that went straight to my son's family. I told him about the property taxes that kept climbing. The medical bills that still trickled in occasionally. The roof that would probably need work in the next few years. The car that wouldn't last forever. The slow, grinding reality of trying to maintain a life I could no longer afford. Thomas listened. He didn't interrupt. He just listened, the way he always does. Like he's hearing not just the words but everything underneath them. When I finished, he took a long sip of his coffee and he said, "You've been drowning." "Yes," I said, "for years. And nobody knows. Michael's suspects. His wife definitely suspects. But they don't know the full extent of it. I've been careful about that." Thomas set down his coffee cup and he looked at me with the kind of directness that only comes from decades of friendship. "Maggie, you can't keep doing this. You're 72 years old. You should be resting. You should be enjoying your retirement. Instead, you're working part-time at a bookstore and quietly bankrupting yourself to help your son. And I'm going to be very honest with you. If you keep going like this, you won't have anything left when you really need it. Not for yourself. Not for emergencies. Not for your own health." "I know," I said quietly. "Do you?" he asked. "Because it doesn't sound like you do. It sounds like you're still in teacher mode. Taking care of everyone else before you take care of yourself." I didn't say anything. Because he was right. That's exactly what I was doing. Thomas pulled out a small notebook from his jacket pocket. He always carries one. "Let's do this properly. I want to see all your accounts. Your savings, your investments, your monthly expenses, everything. And then we're going to make a plan that actually works. Not for Michael, not for your sister, for you." Over the next 3 hours, we went through my finances with a fine-toothed comb. I showed him my bank statements, my investment accounts, my property tax bills, my insurance policies. We calculated everything. And what we found was both better and worse than I expected. The good news was that I wasn't in immediate danger. The house, while expensive to maintain, was still my most valuable asset. My retirement savings, while depleted by what I'd given to Michael, weren't gone yet. The bad news was that at my current rate of spending, I had maybe 7 to 10 years before things became serious. And that was if nothing unexpected happened. One major medical emergency, one crisis, and that timeline could shrink dramatically. "Here's what I think," Thomas said, tapping his pen against his notebook. "You have options. Real options. But they all require you to make a choice that's going to be uncomfortable." "What kind of choice?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "You need to downsize. Sell the house. Move into something smaller, something you can actually afford to maintain without this constant financial stress." There it was. The thing I'd been avoiding even thinking about for years. "But this is my home," I said. "Robert and I bought this house together. We raised Michael here. We built a life here." "I know," Thomas said gently. "And you can keep those memories without keeping the house. But Maggie, you're sacrificing your future to maintain a building. And I don't think that's what Robert would have wanted." I looked out the kitchen window at the backyard. The garden where Robert used to grow tomatoes. The fence he'd built with Michael when Michael was 8 years old. The oak tree where we'd hung a swing for Michael's first daughter. "If I sell the house," I said slowly, "what happens?" Thomas pulled out a calculator and started running numbers. "If you sell for close to market value, and the real estate market has been strong in your area, you'll clear somewhere in the range of $400,000 to $450,000. After taxes and real estate fees, let's say $380,000 net." I felt my stomach flutter. That was a number I hadn't let myself imagine. "Now," Thomas continued, "if you take that money and invest it conservatively, you're looking at roughly $12,000 to $15,000 a year in income. That's on top of your teacher's pension, which gives you another $18,000 a year. So we're talking 30 to 33,000 a year in stable income. You buy a small condo or a townhouse for, say, 150,000, and that's actually generous in this market. You'd have the rest invested and earning. You'd be comfortable. Not rich, but comfortable. And you'd have freedom? Freedom? I repeated. Yes, freedom from this constant financial anxiety. Freedom to make choices based on what you want, not what you have to do. Freedom to help Michael if he truly needs it, but not from a place of sacrifice. From a place of actual ability. I sat with that for a long moment. Then I asked the question that had been underlying everything. Did I make a mistake? I asked. By helping Michael. By doing what I thought was right? Thomas reached across the table and put his hand on mine. No, Maggie. You didn't make a mistake. You did what a mother does. You helped your child when he needed help. That's not a mistake. But there's a difference between helping and self-destruction, and you've been walking that line for too long. That afternoon, after Thomas left, I sat in my living room and I called Michael. Hi, Mom, he said. He sounded tired. It was a Tuesday afternoon, and he was probably at work. Everything okay? Everything's fine, I said. I wanted to tell you something, and I need you to listen without interrupting. There was a pause. I could hear the shift in his attention. He knew something was coming. I've been helping you, I said, for the past several years. Money, every month. Your wife probably knows, but you might not realize the full extent of it. And I need to tell you why I'm telling you this now. And then I told him everything, about the bookstore job, about the financial calculations, about the truth that I'd been carrying alone, about the decision I was making. When I finished, Michael was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, Mom, I'm so sorry. I had no idea. I knew you were helping. But I didn't know it was costing you this much. I know you didn't, I said. And that was on purpose. I didn't want you to feel guilty. But I can't keep doing this. And that's not because I don't love you. It's because I love myself enough to stop destroying myself. Michael cried. My strong, independent son, who rarely shows emotion, cried on the phone with me. And I cried too. What are you going to do? He asked. I'm going to sell the house, I said. I'm going to downsize. I'm going to set boundaries about what I can and cannot do financially. And you're going to be okay. You're going to be more than okay, because you're going to know that your mother believes in you enough to stop saving you. Mom, he started. Let me finish? I said. I love you. That will never change. But love sometimes means saying no. And I'm learning to say no. After we hung up, I sat in the quiet of my house and I felt something shift inside me. It wasn't relief exactly. It was heavier than that. It was the beginning of honesty. That night, I called Patricia. We need to talk, I said. All of us. The whole family. This Sunday. I have something to tell you. Maggie, what's wrong? Are you sick? No, I said. I'm not sick. I'm just finally ready to be honest. That Sunday arrived with the kind of perfect autumn weather that feels almost cruel when you're about to break someone's heart. The sky was bright blue. The trees were turning gold and crimson, and everything in the world seemed to be celebrating a season of change. I suppose that was fitting. I'd asked everyone to come to my house this time, not Patricia's formal dining room with its pristine tablecloth and carefully arranged centerpieces, my living room, my space, my truth. I spent all morning preparing. Not food. I'd ordered sandwiches from the deli because I needed my hands free to shake if they were going to shake. Instead, I prepared myself. I sat in my bedroom and I looked at myself in the mirror. Margaret Eleanor Chen, 70, 2 years old, silver hair, lines around my eyes from smiling and from crying. A face that had lived a full life but maybe not lived truthfully. You can do this, I told my reflection. You've prepared third graders for state testing. You've survived losing your husband. You can do this. But my reflection didn't look entirely convinced. They started arriving at 2 o'clock. Michael and his family came first. His wife Sarah gave me a long hug, and I could feel her understanding in that embrace. She knew what was coming. Michael looked nervous, like he was walking into a confrontation he wasn't sure how to handle. Then Patricia arrived with George and their 2 adult children, Susan and David. David, my nephew who'd made the comment about my borrowed car, looked sheepish. Patricia had clearly talked to him. He avoided my eyes. My brother-in-law Tom came with his wife Linda. A few cousins. Michael's sister from out-of-state video called in. In total, there were 14 people in my living room, and I could feel their curiosity like static electricity in the air. We made small talk for about 15 minutes. Everyone was waiting. Everyone knew something was coming. I could see them exchanging glances, trying to figure out what this was about. Was I sick? Was I moving? Was I getting remarried? So that last one made me smile internally. Finally I stood up. "Thank you all for coming," I said. My voice was steady, which surprised me. "I know this is unusual. I know you're probably wondering why I called you all here. So I'm going to tell you directly because you deserve that, and because I'm tired of not telling the truth." I took a breath. Then I started talking. I told them about Robert's final illness and the medical bills that had been larger than I expected. I told them about my retirement savings and how they'd been slowly depleted. I told them about the property taxes and the maintenance costs on the house. And then I told them about Michael. "I've been helping my son financially," I said, looking directly at my brother-in-law Tom, who always had opinions about how people should manage their money. "For several years now. Every month. Without telling anyone. I took a job at the bookstore specifically to earn money to give to him." Michael's face went red. "But I didn't stop. I did this because he's my son and he was struggling. And I'm his mother, it's what mothers do. But I did it in a way that was unsustainable. I did it while pretending everything was fine. I did it while slowly running myself into a financial crisis." Patricia stood up. "Maggie, why didn't you just ask for help? Why didn't you tell us?" "Because," I said gently, "I didn't think I needed to. I thought I was managing, I thought I was fine. But I wasn't, and it took my nephew making a comment about my car, which, by the way, I own outright, paid for entirely by myself, for me to realize that I couldn't keep living this lie." David looked down at his shoes. "So this is what I'm doing?" I continued. "I'm going to be honest with all of you. I'm going to tell you the truth about my financial situation. And I'm going to tell you about the decision I've made." I walked over to the window and looked out at my garden. The roses were still blooming, even though we were moving into late fall. Robert had planted those roses 15 years ago. "I'm selling the house," I said. The room went quiet. I could feel the shock ripple through it like a stone dropped into still water. "Maggie, no," Patricia said. "You love that house?" "I do love it," I said, turning back to face them. "But I love myself more. And I love my future more. I can't maintain this house and also maintain my financial security. So I'm going to sell it. I'm going to buy something smaller, something I can actually afford. And I'm going to use the proceeds from the sale to rebuild my retirement savings and to have actual financial freedom." "How much are you going to get from the house?" George asked. He was always practical, always thinking about numbers. "Approximately $380,000 after taxes and fees," I said. Thomas had coached me on this. "Don't be vague. Be clear. Be specific." I saw people doing mental math, saw the calculations happening behind their eyes. "I'm going to buy a small condo for around $150,000, I continued. "That will leave me with about $230,000 to invest. On top of my teacher's pension, that's going to give me a comfortable life. Not wealthy, but comfortable. And most importantly, it's going to give me stability." Susan, who was a therapist, was watching me carefully. I could see her professional eye assessing, looking for signs of depression or impulsive decision-making, but she would find neither. This decision was clear and sound. "The reason I'm telling you all this," I said, "is because I'm tired of carrying this alone. I'm tired of pretending. I'm tired of being the person who has it all figured out, the independent widow, the retired teacher who's doing just fine. That person doesn't exist. She never did." I looked at Michael. "I love you. You're my son, and I will always help you if you truly need help. But not like this. Not from a place of self-destruction. That's not love. That's enabling. And both of us deserve better than that." Michael had tears running down his face. Sarah put her hand on his back. "I'm not angry," I said to the room. "I'm not looking for sympathy. I'm not telling you this to make anyone feel guilty. I'm telling you this because honesty is the only thing that's going to set me free. And I'm finally ready to be free." My cousin Linda raised her hand like she was in class. "When are you selling?" "I'm listing the house next month," I said. "I've already talked to a real estate agent. I want to be moved into my new place by spring." "That's fast," Patricia said. "It is," I agreed, "but I'm ready. I've been ready. I've just been too scared to admit it." We talked for another hour. There were questions. There was resistance from Patricia. I think she felt like I was making a hasty decision. Or maybe she was sad about losing the house she'd always loved visiting. But there was also understanding. Especially from the younger people in the room. From Michael's daughter, who said she wished her mother would learn to set boundaries the way I was learning to. From Susan, who said that what I was doing took real courage. David, my nephew, came up to me as people were leaving. "I'm sorry," he said, looking me in the eye for the first time. "About the car comment?" "I know you are," I said. "And thank you. Your comment was unkind, but it was also honest, and it pushed me toward honesty. So in a strange way, you did me a favor." He hugged me. 14-year-old boys don't usually hug their aunts, but this one did. After everyone left, I sat alone in my living room. The house felt different now, lighter somehow. Like a secret had been lifted from it. I walked through each room. The living room where we'd opened Christmas presents. The kitchen where Robert and I had danced to bad music on Friday nights. The master bedroom where I'd cried after he died. The third bedroom where Michael had done his homework, where his children had slept during sleepovers. "Thank you," I whispered to the house. "For everything. For being my home. For keeping me safe. For being a place where love lived." That night I called the real estate agent. Her name was Patricia too, Patricia Morrison, a bright, energetic woman in her 50s who'd been recommended by Thomas. "I'm ready," I told her. "Let's list it." "Are you sure?" she asked. "This is a big decision. I'm more sure of this than I've been of anything in a very long time," I said. The next morning, I woke up and I felt light. For the first time in years, I felt light. The weight of pretense, of sacrifice, of hidden struggle, it was still there, but it was transforming into something else. It was becoming honesty. It was becoming freedom. The house sold faster than anyone expected. Within 3 weeks, we had an offer. Within 2 months, I was moving into my new home, a charming one-bedroom condo with a small patio and a view of the city. It was smaller, yes, but it was mine in a way the big house had never quite been. This was my choice. This was my new beginning, and as I packed up 40 years of memories, I realized something profound. I'd spent so many years taking care of everyone else that I'd forgotten I deserved to be taken care of. I deserved stability. I deserved peace. I deserved a life that wasn't built on quiet sacrifice and hidden struggle. The hardest part wasn't leaving the house. The hardest part was admitting that I'd spent decades putting everyone else's needs before my own. And the most liberating part was finally learning to stop. Moving day was in March. Spring had finally arrived, and the cherry blossoms were blooming all over the neighborhood. It felt like the universe was celebrating with me, though I knew that was probably silly. The world doesn't care about one woman's fresh start. But I allowed myself to feel that way anyway. My new condo was in a neighborhood I'd never lived in before. It was quieter than I expected, filled with young professionals and retired couples like myself. The building had a small community center, a fitness room, and a garden courtyard. When the real estate agent had shown it to me, I'd felt a flutter of possibility in my chest. Michael and Sarah came to help me move. So did Tom and Linda. Even Patricia showed up with casseroles, enough to fill my new refrigerator and freezer. She'd been quiet since the big family gathering, but she wasn't angry. I think she was processing. Learning to see me as something other than the strong, independent widow. Learning to see me as a person who needed things too. We packed boxes. We drove them across the city. We unpacked them in rooms that were smaller but somehow felt bigger because they were truly mine. The condo had 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, a small living room, and a kitchen that was barely big enough for 2 people to stand in at the same time. It was perfect. I'd made a deliberate choice about what to bring and what to leave behind. Some of the furniture from the house was too large. Some of it carried too many memories. The dining room table where we'd hosted countless holiday dinners, the bedroom set I'd shared with Robert. Those things I sold or donated. What I kept were the pieces that brought me joy without weighing me down. My grandmother's china cabinet, the bookshelf Robert had built in his workshop, the oak rocking chair where I'd held Michael as a baby. The first night in the condo, I sat alone on my small patio and I cried. But they were good tears. They were the tears of someone who's finally made a decision and is accepting the reality of it. I was leaving behind 40 years of a life I'd built with Robert. I was leaving behind the house where I'd raised my son. I was leaving behind the physical embodiment of a marriage that had defined me for so long. But I was also leaving behind the weight, the constant anxiety, the pretense, the slow suffocation of a life that had become too small for who I needed to become. The next morning, I woke up in my new bed in my new home, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years. I felt excited about the day ahead. I spent that day organizing. I put my books on the shelf in a new order, not by title or author, but by how I felt about them. The stories that made me laugh went together. The ones that made me think went together. The ones that broke my heart and put it back together again went in their own special section. It sounds like a small thing, but it was an act of reclaiming myself. These were my choices now. My preferences, my life. I called Thomas that afternoon. How does it feel? He asked. Terrifying, I said. And wonderful. And terrifying. That's exactly how it should feel, he said. You're making a choice based on honesty instead of fear. That's rare, Maggie. Most people never get to that place. Over the next few weeks, I settled into a routine. I quit my job at the bookstore, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. I needed time to figure out who I was when I wasn't taking care of everyone else. I needed space to breathe. I joined a book club at the community center. I started going to yoga classes. I volunteered at the local library, helping with their reading programs for children. I did these things not because I had to, but because they brought me joy. It was a revelation, doing things just for joy. Michael called me regularly. We talked more honestly than we ever had. He told me that my honesty had given him permission to be honest too. He and Sarah had started going to therapy. He was working with a career counselor to find better work. He was rebuilding his life on a more solid foundation instead of accepting help that covered up the real problems. I owe you an apology, he said one day. You don't owe me anything, I said. No, he insisted. I let you carry me for years. I knew something was off. Sarah kept telling me something was off, but I let myself accept your help without really understanding what it was costing you. That wasn't fair to you. No, I agreed. It wasn't, but I allowed it. We both have to take responsibility for our part in it. I'm trying to change that, he said. Sarah and I are doing better. We're talking about buying a house. Nothing fancy, but something that's ours. I want you to know that we're going to be okay. More than okay? I know you will, I said, and I meant it. Patricia came to visit my new condo about a month after I'd moved in. She brought flowers and wine and a nervous energy that told me she'd been thinking about our relationship. We sat in my small living room drinking wine and looking out at the city skyline from my small patio. I'm sorry, she said. I should have noticed. I should have asked you more questions. I should have realized you were struggling. You couldn't have known, I said. I didn't want you to know. I made sure you didn't know. But I'm your sister, she said. I should have been more present. Yes, I said gently. You should have. But I also should have let you. We both made choices that kept us from being as close as we could have been. Patricia took a sip of her wine. I've been thinking about my own life since you told us everything. About all the ways I'm pretending. George and I aren't as happy as we pretend to be. Susan is struggling with anxiety and I keep telling her to just get over it. David is angry about something, and I don't know what it is because I'm too busy making sure the house looks perfect and the dinners are impressive. So what are you going to do? I asked. I'm going to be more honest, she said. Like you? It's terrifying? It is, I agreed. But it's worth it. We talked for hours that evening. Real conversation. The kind we hadn't had in years. By the time Patricia left, something had shifted between us. We weren't just sisters anymore, we were friends. One day in May, about 2 months after I'd moved, I got a call from the real estate agent. I have an offer on your old house, Patricia Morrison said. A young family. 3 kids, they're very excited about it. I felt a flutter in my chest. The house, my house, was moving on. Moving toward a new chapter with a new family. Tell them it's a good house, I said. It's a house where people can build a life. It's a house where memories can happen. I will, she said. After we hung up, I sat with that feeling for a while. I'd been expecting sadness. I'd been expecting to feel like I was losing something. But instead, I felt peace. The house had served its purpose in my life. It had sheltered me and Robert. It had been the backdrop for our love story. But it wasn't my future anymore. My future was here, in this small condo, with my smaller life that somehow felt bigger. That evening, I walked around the neighborhood. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. I passed young couples holding hands. I passed families with children running ahead. I passed other elderly people like myself, out for an evening walk. I felt like I belonged here. Not because I was anyone special, but because I was finally being myself, the real self, not the performance I'd been giving for so long. I thought about all the years I'd spent managing other people's expectations. I thought about the smile I'd worn at that dinner when David made his comment about my car. I thought about all the times I'd said, I'm fine, when I wasn't fine. I thought about all the money I'd given away while pretending I had plenty. and I thought about how much courage it had taken to stop pretending. When I got back to my condo, I made myself a cup of tea and I sat on my small patio and I looked out at the city lights beginning to twinkle on, and I smiled. Not the smile I'd learned to give the world. A real smile. The smile of someone who's finally come home. Summer came to the city, and with it came a series of unexpected changes that taught me something profound. When you change, everyone around you changes too. It's like dropping a stone in still water. The ripples don't just affect the center. They touch everything. It started with David, my nephew, the one who'd made the comment about my borrowed car all those months ago. He called me one afternoon in early June. He was 16 now, almost 17, and he sounded different than the last time we'd spoken. More serious. "Aunt Maggie," he said, "can I come talk to you? In person. I need advice about something." I told him to come over after school. When he arrived at my condo that afternoon, he looked nervous. He sat on my small couch in my small living room, and I made him lemonade, and I waited for him to find the words. "I've been thinking about what you did," he said finally. "About how you told us the truth, even though it was hard. And I've been thinking about how Mom and Dad aren't happy, but they pretend they are. And I've been thinking about how I pretend at school. I pretend I'm not smart, because my friends think smart kids are nerds. I pretend I don't care about things that actually matter to me. I pretend a lot." "Why?" I asked. "Because I'm scared," he said. "If I'm really me, people won't like me." I set down my lemonade and I looked at this young man who was becoming more real right before my eyes. "David," I said, "the people who matter will like the real you. And the people who don't like the real you, they probably don't deserve to know you anyway." He cried a little bit then. 16-year-old boys don't usually cry in front of their aunts. But this one did. And I held his hand and I told him that being yourself takes more courage than pretending, but it's the only life worth living. After he left, I called Patricia. "Your son just taught me something," I said. "He came here trying to figure out how to be more honest with the world. And it's because he watched what I did." Patricia was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "He asked us last week if we'd consider going to family therapy. George and I thought he was being ridiculous. But now I think maybe he was being brave." 2 weeks later, Patricia called me back. "We're going to therapy," she said. "All of us. David and Susan too. I'm done pretending everything is fine when it's not." "I'm proud of you," I said. "I learned from the best," she said. The changes kept spreading. Michael's company noticed his increased focus and commitment. He got a promotion. Not a huge one, but it was real. He and Sarah bought their house. I went to the closing with them, and I cried real tears watching my son become a homeowner based on his own effort, not his mother's sacrifice. Susan, Patricia's daughter, started her own therapy practice. She'd been working for someone else for years, but she'd been too afraid to take the risk of going solo. She told me later that watching her mother finally get honest gave her permission to be brave. In August, I received an unexpected letter. It was from Thomas, but it wasn't a letter about finances. It was something different. "Maggie," it read, "watching you change your life has changed mine. I've been married to Helen for 35 years, and we've been slowly drifting apart." I thought that was just what happened with long marriages. But after seeing what you did, the courage it took to be honest with yourself and everyone else, I realized I've been choosing comfort over authenticity. Helen and I are going to couples therapy. I don't know what will come of it, but I know we can't keep pretending. Thank you for showing me that honesty, no matter how terrifying, is the only way to really live. I read that letter 3 times. And I understood something about the nature of change. When one person decides to stop pretending, it gives everyone around them permission to stop pretending too. But change isn't always easy, and it's not always smooth. One afternoon in late August, I ran into Patricia at the grocery store. She looked upset. "What's wrong?" I asked. "George wants a separation," she said quietly. "He says that now that I'm forcing him to be honest about his feelings, he's realized he's unhappy. He's been unhappy for years." "I'm so sorry," I said. "Are you?" she asked. And then she shook her head. "I mean, I'm upset, but I'm not actually surprised. And maybe this is what needs to happen. Maybe we're not meant to be together anymore. Maybe we were just both too scared to admit it." "Is it what you want?" I asked. "Or is it what you're resigned to?" "I don't know yet," she said. "Ask me in 6 months." 6 months later, Patricia and George were separated but cordial. They were both in therapy. George had moved into an apartment across town. Patricia was figuring out who she was without him. It wasn't the ending anyone would have chosen, but it was honest. And honest, I was learning, was better than almost anything else. In October, I got a phone call from the bookstore where I'd worked. "We miss you," my former manager Claire said. "Would you consider coming back? Not full-time, maybe just 5 hours a week. We could use your wisdom with our new staff." I thought about it. I didn't need the money anymore, but I'd loved working there. I'd loved being around books. I'd loved helping customers find the stories they needed. "Yes," I said. "I'll do it." And so I went back to the bookstore, but on my own terms. 5 hours a week. Enough to keep me connected to something I loved without it consuming my life. It was the perfect balance. One day, while I was shelving books, a young woman came up to me. She looked stressed. She was holding a book about financial independence. "Excuse me," she said, "but I saw you shelving this book and I wondered, do you know anything about it?" I turned to look at her. She was maybe 35, with dark circles under her eyes and the kind of tension in her shoulders that spoke of carrying too much. "I do know about it," I said. "Are you thinking about reading it?" "I'm thinking I need to," she said. "My mom just told me that she's been secretly helping me financially for years, and it's been costing her everything. She's selling her house because of it, and I had no idea. I feel like the worst daughter in the world." I put down the book I was holding, and I really looked at this young woman. "You're not the worst daughter," I said gently. "You're a daughter who didn't know. That's different. The question now is, what are you going to do with that knowledge?" "I don't know," she said, and she started to cry right there in the middle of the bookstore. I brought her to the break room. I made her tea, and I told her my story. I told her about Robert, about Michael, about the years of pretending, about the house I'd sold, about the life I'd rebuilt. And I told her the most important part. Your mother didn't do this because she had to. She did it because she loves you. But love sometimes means letting people know that you can't carry them forever. And now you have the chance to release her from that burden. That's the best gift you can give her." The young woman sat there, drinking her tea, processing. "How did your son react?" she asked. "When you told him?" "He cried," I said. "He felt guilty. But then he felt something else. He felt respected. He felt like I believed in him enough to stop saving him. And that changed everything." She nodded slowly. "I think I need to go talk to my mom." "I think you do too," I said. After she left, Claire came into the break room. "You've been back here for 6 weeks and you're already changing people's lives?" she said with a smile. "I'm just telling my story," I said. "That's what changes people," Claire said. "Stories. Real stories. About real people struggling and surviving and becoming who they're meant to be." That evening, I sat on my patio with a cup of tea and I thought about the young woman in the bookstore. I thought about how my truth had rippled out into the world and touched someone else's life. I thought about how Patricia was finally learning who she was. I thought about David finding the courage to be himself. I thought about Michael building a life based on his own effort. I thought about the house being filled with a young family creating new memories. I thought about all the ways that one woman's decision to stop pretending had changed the landscape of everyone around her. And I realized something that I wished I'd known decades ago. You can't inspire others to be brave until you're willing to be brave yourself. You can't give anyone else permission to be honest until you're honest with yourself. You can't help anyone become who they're meant to be until you become who you're meant to be. My phone buzzed. A text from Michael. "Sarah's pregnant. We're going to have another baby. I wanted you to know first." I read that text 3 times. My son, my beautiful son who I thought I needed to save, was creating new life, building a future based on his own strength. I texted back, "I'm so happy for you. Tell Sarah I said congratulations. And Michael, I'm proud of you. I've always been proud of you. I just forgot to tell you." His response came quickly, "Love you, Mom. And thank you for everything, for the help, for the honesty, for the freedom." And I sat there on my small patio, in my small condo, in my rebuilt life, and I cried. But they were the kind of tears that come when you finally understand that sometimes the greatest gift we can give the people we love is letting them go. Winter arrived early that year. By mid-November, the first snow had fallen and the city transformed into something magical. The holidays were approaching, and for the first time in decades, I wasn't dreading them. I wasn't counting the cost of gifts. I wasn't calculating how I could make everyone happy while quietly sacrificing myself. I was just living. Michael's wife Sarah called me one afternoon in early December. "Maggie," she said, I need to tell you something, and I want you to hear it from me before Michael tells you. My heart jumped. After so many years of hiding things, my first instinct was always to fear bad news. What is it? I asked. Michael and I have been talking, she said. About what you did. About how you spent years helping us without us knowing. And we realized that we want to do something for you. We know you wouldn't ask, you'd never ask. But we want it anyway. Sarah, you don't owe me anything, I said. I know, she said. That's exactly why we want to do this. Because we don't owe you anything. We want to give you this gift freely, the way you gave your help freely. What kind of gift? I asked cautiously. A trip, she said. 3 weeks. Anywhere you want to go. We're sending you to Europe. Michael booked it. We're handling everything. All you have to do is say yes and pack a bag. I couldn't speak. I literally could not find words. Are you there? Sarah asked. Yes. I'm here. I don't know what to say. Say yes, she said gently. Say yes to something wonderful that's being given to you, not earned by you. Just say yes. And I did. 3 weeks later I was on a plane to Paris. Me 73-year-old Margaret Eleanor Chen, a retired teacher from a modest city, flying to Paris for the first time in my life. I'd always wanted to see Paris. Robert and I had talked about going someday. Someday had never come. We'd been saving money. We'd been planning. And then Robert had gotten sick, and someday had disappeared. But now I was here, and I was alone, and I was free. I stayed in a small hotel in the Marais district. The room was tiny, smaller than my condo, but it had a window that overlooked a cobblestone street. Every morning, I'd wake up and look out that window, and I'd have to remind myself that this was real. I wandered. I didn't make plans. I just walked the streets of Paris and let the city show me what it wanted to show me. I sat in cafes and watched people. I went to museums and stood in front of paintings that had meant something to someone. I walked along the Seine at sunset. I went to Notre Dame and lit a candle. I didn't pray. I've never been particularly religious, but I sat there in that ancient church and I felt something. Gratitude maybe, or just peace. One afternoon, I was sitting in a small cafe near the Sorbonne, drinking coffee and eating a pastry, when a young man sat down at my table. There were other empty tables around, but he chose mine. Excuse me, he said in English with a French accent, but I noticed you sitting alone, and I thought you might like some company. I almost said no. The old Maggie would have said no. The old Maggie would have been afraid of being a burden, of imposing, of taking up space in someone else's day. But the new Maggie smiled and said, I would actually like that. His name was Pierre. He was a college student studying philosophy. We talked for 2 hours about everything and nothing. About life and meaning and what it means to be happy. He told me I had kind eyes. I told him he had the kind of mind that would change the world someday. What brings you to Paris alone? He asked. And I told him. Not the whole story. That would have taken longer than 2 hours. But I told him about choosing myself. About selling my house. About learning to live honestly. You are very brave, he said when I finished. Most people never learn this lesson. Most people die still pretending. I almost was one of those people, I said. After he left, I sat there in that cafe and I cried. Not sad tears. Grateful tears. The kind of tears that come when you realize how close you came to never really living at all. I spent another week in Paris. Then I went to Italy. I'd always wanted to see Italy too. I stayed in a small village in Tuscany. I ate pasta that tasted like it had been made by someone's grandmother. I watched the sunset paint the hills in colors I didn't know existed. An older woman staying at the same guest house befriended me. Her name was Lucia and she was Italian, and she'd lived in that village her whole life. She was 78, and she was vibrant in a way that made me understand what it meant to really live. Why are you here alone? She asked me. Because I can be, I said. Because my son gave me the gift of freedom. Brava, she said. That is the most important gift. Freedom to be who you are. We spent several days together. She took me to her house. We cooked together. She taught me to make pasta from scratch. We talked about life and loss and the strange beauty of getting older. The secret, she told me one evening over wine, is that when you stop trying to be what everyone needs you to be, you finally get to be what you actually are, and that is always better than the pretense. How did you learn that? I asked. I lost my husband, she said, 40 years ago, and everyone expected me to become a sad widow, to shrivel up, to stop living, and I tried for a while, but then I realized that dying slowly while I was still alive was the worst kind of death. So I decided to live, really live, not for anyone else. For me? And are you happy? I asked. Yes, she said simply. I am happy. For the first time in my life, I am actually happy. I left Italy with Lucia's phone number and a promise to write. I meant it. I still do. The last week of my trip, I went to Vienna. I heard a symphony. I walked through the palace where Mozart had played as a child. I stood in places where history had happened. And I thought about my life. How I'd spent so much of it in one place, in one house, in one role. How I'd been so busy taking care of the details of living that I'd forgotten to actually live. On my last night in Vienna, I sat in my hotel room and I wrote in a journal. It was something I'd never done before. I'm not a writer, I'm a teacher. But I wrote anyway. To whoever reads this, I wrote, if you are sacrificing yourself for everyone else, stop. Not because you're selfish, but because you're human. Because you matter. Because the people you love actually want you to be happy, even if they don't know how to tell you. Because there is a life waiting for you that's so much bigger and more beautiful than the one you're living in hiding. Stop pretending. Stop sacrificing. Stop dying slowly. Start living. Start being honest. Start becoming who you're meant to be. It's never too late. I promise you. It's never too late. I didn't know who I was writing that to. Maybe myself. Maybe the young woman I'd met in the bookstore. Maybe you listening to this story right now. Maybe everyone. When I got back home, Michael and Sarah picked me up from the airport. I was tan and rested and filled with a joy I'd never felt before. Michael hugged me and he said, "Welcome home, Mom." But I corrected him gently. "I came home," I said, "while I was gone. I finally came home to myself." That evening, I unpacked my suitcase. I found Lucia's address tucked in my journal. I found ticket stubs from museums and cafes. I found notes I'd written to myself. I found the postcards I'd bought but never sent. And I found something else. A photograph. It was taken in Paris, on the Pont des Arts. The photographer was Pierre, the young man from the cafe. I'm standing by the railing, looking out at the sign, and I'm smiling. Not the smile I learned to give the world. A real smile. The smile of someone who's finally free. I framed that photograph. It sits on my bookshelf in my condo. Every time I look at it, I remember. I remember who I was before I learned to stop pretending. I remember how close I came to never taking that trip. I remember how my son believed in me enough to give me wings. And I remember that it's never too late to start living. I'm standing in my condo, looking out at the city lights beginning to twinkle on as evening falls. It's December again. The holidays are here, and everything is different. This morning, I received a gift in the mail. It was from Lucia. Inside the package was a beautiful Italian cookbook and a handwritten letter. She wrote about her life in Tuscany. She wrote about how she thinks of me often. She wrote about how my story gave her permission to tell her own story to others. She enclosed photographs of her village, her house, her garden, and at the end, she wrote, "Come back soon. Free, there is always room at my table for a friend who knows how to truly live." I cried when I read that. Not sad tears. The other kind. This afternoon, David came by with his girlfriend. He wanted me to meet her. She's kind and intelligent and she laughs at his jokes. But more importantly, David is being himself with her. The real him. Not the pretend version. He's not hiding his intelligence or his sensitivity or his dreams. He's just being. "Aunt Maggie," he said before he left, "I wanted to thank you for showing me that it's okay to be yourself. My mom did the same thing. She's so much happier now. We all are." Patricia came by later. She's been divorced from George for 8 months now. She's not sad about it. She's actually thriving. She's gone back to school to get a degree in counseling. She's starting a therapy practice focused on helping families navigate change and honesty. She's dating a man named Richard who actually listens when she talks. She's become the person she was always meant to be. "I owe you everything," she said when she arrived. "You owe me nothing?" I corrected her. "But you could thank me by living boldly, by continuing to be honest, by helping other people find their way to honesty. That's all the gratitude I need." Michael called tonight. Sarah is due in 2 weeks, their second baby. The baby that wouldn't exist if I hadn't stopped pretending. The baby that represents hope and healing and the future that comes from honesty. "We're thinking of naming him Robert," Michael said. "After Dad. I want my son to know his grandfather. I want him to know the man who raised me to believe that love means telling the truth." "Robert would be honored," I said. And I meant it. After I hung up with Michael, I sat down and I thought about everything that's changed. Not just for me, but for everyone around me. One woman, one decision, one choice to stop pretending. And it changed the entire landscape of everyone she loved. Patricia is building a new life. David is becoming who he's meant to be. Michael is secure in his own strength. Thomas is healing his marriage through honesty. The young woman from the bookstore went to her mother. They cried together and they made peace. And they're rebuilding their relationship on a foundation of truth instead of hidden sacrifice. But there's something else I've learned this year. Something I didn't expect. The hardest part isn't choosing honesty. The hardest part is maintaining it. Because dishonesty is seductive. It's easier to slip back into pretending. It's easier to say, "I'm fine," when someone asks how you are. It's easier to give more than you have. It's easier to carry the weight. I've had moments this year when I wanted to go back. When I wanted to call Michael and offer him money. When I wanted to buy Patricia an expensive Christmas present to prove my love. When I wanted to work extra hours at the bookstore to have more money to give away. But each time I caught myself. Each time I remembered. Each time I chose myself. And I'm not ashamed of that anymore. I used to think that choosing yourself was selfish. That taking care of your own needs before taking care of everyone else's meant you were unkind. But I've learned the truth. You cannot give from an empty cup. You cannot help others find their strength if you're busy destroying your own. You cannot teach honesty if you're living a lie. Self-care isn't selfish. It's the most loving thing you can do for the people you care about. This year, I've done things I never did before. I've taken yoga classes. I've gone to the opera. I've read books that made me think. I've joined a women's group at the community center. I've started mentoring young women at the library, teaching them not just how to find books, but how to find themselves. I've slowed down, I've breathed, I've lived. And in living this way, I've become more valuable to everyone around me, not less. Because now when I help someone, it comes from a place of genuine ability, not desperation. Now when I give advice, it comes from a place of wisdom, not obligation. Now when I love someone, it comes from a place of wholeness, not brokenness. Tonight, as I sit here in my small condo in my rebuilt life, I want to tell you something. I want to tell you, whoever you are listening to this story, that it's not too late for you either. If you're sacrificing yourself for everyone else, it's not too late to stop. If you're pretending everything is fine when it's not too late to be honest. If you're slowly dying while you're still alive, it's not too late to start living. Change is terrifying. I won't lie to you about that. When you decide to live honestly, some people won't understand. Some relationships will shift. Some things you thought were permanent will change. You'll lose the comfort of pretense. You'll lose the ease of hiding. But what you'll gain is infinitely more valuable. You'll gain yourself. You'll gain freedom. You'll gain a life that's actually yours, not a life you're performing for everyone else. And here's the thing about that. When you give yourself permission to live authentically, you give everyone around you permission too. Your honesty becomes their inspiration. Your courage becomes their blueprint. Your life becomes their permission slip to finally live theirs. I think about that dinner. That Sunday dinner where my nephew pointed at my car and said words that stung like a slap. I think about how angry I was at first, how embarrassed, how it felt like exposure. But that moment was a gift. That moment was the stone that created the ripples. That moment was the beginning of everything changing. If David hadn't said those words, I might have kept pretending for another 5, 10, 20 years. I might have died in that house, surrounded by memories, slowly suffocating under the weight of hidden sacrifice. But he did say those words, and I finally listened, and everything changed. So to that young man, now sitting at my table with his girlfriend, I want to say thank you. Thank you for being cruel enough to be kind. Thank you for saying the thing everyone was thinking. Thank you for forcing me to face the truth. And to everyone listening to this story, I want to say the same thing. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening to my truth. Thank you for allowing my story to be a mirror for your own. And if my story has stirred something in you, if it's made you want to change, to be honest, to stop pretending, then please, do it. Don't wait. Don't let another year pass. Don't let another holiday season come and go with you smiling on the outside while breaking on the inside. Be brave, tell the truth, choose yourself, and then watch as everything around you transforms. This is Margaret Eleanor Chen. I'm 74 years old. I'm a retired teacher. I'm a grandmother soon to be again. I'm a friend. I'm a woman who nearly destroyed herself by trying to save everyone else. And I'm a woman who finally learned that the greatest gift I can give to the people I love is to love myself first. My house is sold, my life is smaller, my bank account is healthier, my heart is fuller, and my soul is finally at peace. If you felt moved by my story, if it's touched something deep inside you, I want to ask you to do something. Share this story. Tell someone else. Let them know that they're not alone. Let them know that sacrifice doesn't have to be silent. Let them know that honesty, no matter how terrifying, is the only path to true freedom. And if you're struggling with your own version of this story, if you're carrying your own hidden burdens, if you're slowly dying while you're still alive, please reach out. Talk to someone. A friend, a therapist, a counselor, someone. Because you deserve better, you deserve to live, you deserve to be yourself, and it's never, ever too late to start. Thank you for listening. Thank you for caring. Thank you for allowing my truth to become part of your story. I'm going to go now. I'm going to sit on my patio and watch the city lights. I'm going to have a cup of tea and remember how far I've come. I'm going to think about the people I love and how glad I am that I'm finally here, fully present, fully honest, fully alive. And tomorrow, I'm going to wake up and do it all again. I'm going to choose myself. I'm going to live honestly. I'm going to be the woman I was always meant to be. Because it's never too late. Not for you, not for me, not for anyone. This is my truth, and I'm finally free.